My name is Shawn Roe. I'm 37 years old. I'm a student here at the University of Montana. I am also a former inmate of the Department of Corrections. I was introduced to methamphetamine at the age of 12 years old. I didn't even know it at the time, but I was well on my way to prison before I ever actually made it there. I think the things that led up to that were a combination of a bunch of different things, like my environment, of course, drug use, trying to fit in, and low self-esteem, kind of. I was an instant addict. At 12, 13 years old, I was scraping marijuana pipes, trying to get as much resin out of them as I could, getting metal shavings out of them and putting them in a pipe and just hoping that there was enough resin on these metal shavings to get one hit and give me a head change. And I was so young, I didn't really know what was happening at that time, but I was already well on my way into a pretty nasty addiction to drugs.
Those are pictures of me when I hit the intake unit at MSP, starting at the top left and all the way to the bottom right, from in chronological order there. One at the top, I was 20 years old, and down at the bottom, I think I was 32.
When he was younger, he was great. I mean, he was on the honor roll. He was a very smart kid, very funny, and we were like this. And then he got into the drugs. My nephew gave him some drugs, some meth when he was 12. We lived in Clinton and in Missoula here. I think till his sophomore year in high school, and then we moved to Missoula. I didn't know about it for years. Shawn never told me. And I didn't, everybody told me he's on meth, and I'm going, oh no, he's not. I was in denial about it because I didn't see, any difference in him really, except that he kind of got bored with school, and the kids he was hanging around with I wasn't thrilled about. But there was not much I could do about that. Shawn's dad lived in Jackson at the time that Shawn started doing the meth and stuff. We had split up when Shawn was about 6. His dad was a very hardcore alcoholic and very violent man.
I hung out with a lot of older kids, and we lived in a small town outside of Missoula in a trailer court, so there was a lot of poverty, not a lot to do, and we just kind of were doing stuff to get in trouble to pass the time, I actually ended up being convicted of my first felony at the age of 14 years old. I went on to be convicted of another felony at the age of 17. So before I even turned 18 years old, I was already a two-time convicted felon.
I was in shock that the first thing that happened that the cops came to my house about was they had stolen a car and took it into Missoula. And then I found out they stole other things, a truck and a boat or something too. But his friend didn't say him, and he said he just did that by himself. But I found out later through another friend that Shawn was involved in all of that. And I couldn't believe he'd do something like that.
At that time, I still didn't really realize what I was getting myself into. For me, looking back on it, I knew what I was doing at the time was illegal per se, but it didn't really feel wrong to me, which is something that stuck with me throughout my adult years too. It just kind of was like the way things were, and it's what we did. I've been through the state prison system 4 different times, spent a little over 12 years there altogether. I was in active addiction for drugs and alcohol for over 22 years. I didn't like my life. I didn't like my life for most of my life, I would say. I didn't really know that there was any other way for me. I remember my 3rd time that I was incarcerated, I spent about 4.5 years straight in there. At one point in time in my life, when I was incarcerated, I lost any hope that I was ever going to be able to make it out of that life at all. I thought that I had been the way that I was for so long that there was no way out of it. When When you're sitting in prison, you don't ever see anybody that makes it. We're just sitting there and we watch people come and go and come and go. And for me personally, I got it in my head that nobody ever makes it. Everybody always comes back. There's no way out of this. I didn't really have any desire to change, or wasn't really going to try to change, because I had surrendered myself to my addiction and the criminality and all that long ago. So I knew that I wasn't done doing what I did, and I got out, and I was out for about 45 days, and I went right back on another felony. And when I went back on that felony, I was sitting in jail, and I just kept thinking to myself, like, I don't want to be here anymore. I'm sick of being here. And it wasn't even just being in jail I was talking about. Like, I was just sick of being alive, and I was sick of hurting all the time. And I was sick of hurting people, I was sick of hurting myself, I was sick of hurting my family, and I just didn't know what to do, and I made a decision there that I was going to sit there and do whatever amount of time I had to do for, what I had done that time. And when I got out, I was going to really give it a shot to try to change. And at the time, I didn't even really know if that was an option for me. Honestly, I didn't, I was going to try, but I didn't know how to go about doing it, or didn't even know if it was something that I was working toward that was a real thing. So, I made that promise to myself, and when this is over, I'll give it one more shot. And then, I pretty much decided that if I came back again, I was just going to commit suicide, because like I had said, I was just sick of being there. The one thing that gave me a little bit of hope was I heard somebody that had a story similar to mine. They'd been where I had been. They'd been in active addiction for as long as I'd been in active addiction, and they had made it out of it. And that was something I'd never heard before. And that gave me just that little bit of hope. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt any kind of hope at all.
I was like, I'm going to the next. He says, all right, bro, see you next time. And I'm like, oh, shit, that sucks.
At the end of that prison stint, I ended up going to a inpatient treatment facility for the first time in my life. While I was there, a few different things happened to me. One, I was able to get clean, because when I was in prison, I couldn't stop using drugs for the life of me. They were around all over the place, and if I had access to them, I could not stop myself from using them. And that's another thing that I struggled with, was I didn't even know if it was ever going to be possible for me ever to stop using drugs, because I've been obsessed with getting high since the age of 12. It was like a habit that was ingrained in me, and I just couldn't see me ever not wanting to, like, even though I wanted to stop a lot of times, most of the time, like, I couldn't see myself ever not thinking about it and obsessing over it. So, I kind of started doing some spiritual stuff while I was in there, trying to find something to believe in, you know what I mean? Something bigger than myself and bigger than this world to believe in, because myself and what I'd seen in this world, there wasn't a whole lot there to go off of, and I needed something more than that. And I kind of started to develop a relationship with a higher power, and it came to the point where I knew that I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life or what I should do with my life, so I kind of just surrendered that to the higher power, so I said, I don't know what to do, so show me what I'm supposed to be doing, why I'm here. Show me a reason to stay here even.
I was relieved. I was so happy. And I was just praying to God it'd work, and it did. I was shocked, because I have a nephew that's been 3 times, and he's back in jail again right now. And I know other people that have been through treatment and back on it, 2 months later. So I was praying to God it'd work for him, and it did.
While I was in that treatment facility, I met a man who became a really good friend of mine. When he was moved into my room, he was trying to do his first assignment, and I realized that he didn't know how to read. So I decided, maybe I should try to help this guy learn how to read at least a little bit. And I tried real hard, and he tried real hard. I did not do the best job. I'm not a very good teacher, but I tried and he tried. We both tried real hard, and that meant a lot to him. And I could see that. And he told me one time, and this is something that stuck with me and changed a lot about how I thought about myself and just the world in general. He was asking me, do you have any kids? And I don't have any children. I was like, no, I don't have any kids, man. And he said, you should have some kids, man, because you got a lot to offer. And that really stuck with me. And from that point out, I knew that I wanted to do something to try to help other people in some way. And I knew at that point too that it was going to be something to do with people who were in my position, who had been where I'd been and who were struggling, because helping that man with his reading helped me to, I got the feeling of what it feels like to help somebody who's struggling. And I know what it's like to be struggling. So I made it through that program, and it was one of the things that I always struggled with getting back out to the streets was a sense of belonging. Like when I was incarcerated, it wasn't hard for me to make friends. I always had a bunch of friends. I got a bunch of validation for the kind of crimes I would commit. I felt like I mattered in there to people, I guess you could say. And then I'd get out here to the streets, and I'd been gone for so long that I didn't even really know anybody in my hometown anymore, didn't know where anybody was at. And I felt like a nobody out here. And that's kind of a hard thing to deal with, where you go from being with a bunch of people who are your friends that care about you, care what you got going on in your life, then you go to somewhere where you're nobody, and nobody cares what's going on with you or who you are or any of that.
I knew a lot about Shawn's history before we met. I did not hold it against him in any way because I have a history myself. I'm a convicted felon. I got a felony DUI in 2010. So I have my stuff too. And it actually attracted me to him more, to know that like he'd been through all of that and has been able to overcome it, because I know that takes a really strong person. I've been clean from fentanyl and meth. I mean, I was addicted to everything, but I've been clean for about 15 months. It was not easy for me to get clean. I've been to rehab 15 times. I definitely thought I was gonna die. I OD'd 4 times. I was living on the streets in California. It was very serious. I'm really happy that I came out the other side. He reached out to me on Facebook. We had a lot of mutual friends who are mainly in recovery, so I think he could tell that I was probably in recovery, and he sent me a message, and we started talking and went on our first date about a week later. I feel like he motivates me and inspires me every day. He's the only person I've ever been with who I really truly believe he helps me be the best version of myself that I could be. And my family sees that, my friends see that. It's very obvious to everybody around us that we balance each other out, and this is healthy. We share so many of the same passions, and we have just a lot in common, so when I'm down, he can really help kind of lift me up. And it's definitely been instrumental in my recovery to be with somebody who understands and who just motivates me.
I go to 12-step meetings to deal with my addiction. That's the only way I've been able to stay clean. It's been a huge change in my life. And through those meetings, I found a support group too of people who I hadn't been incarcerated with, people who would be a bad influence on me, because you get out and you start hanging out with your friends from prison like I did every other time. And it doesn't take long for us to go back to doing the same thing that we used to do together. We feed off of each other in that kind of aspect. And so I found a support group of new people that I needed to meet, that I had at least some common ground with. I wouldn't say that I felt really comfortable around these people, but I felt more comfortable with them than I did when I was in a store or talking to other people, because I had that common ground with them of we struggle with the disease of addiction. I kept going to meetings. When I was in pre-release, I made a resignation to the fact that I was going to use it for what it was for. I was going to use it to save up money, to get a job, to reintegrate myself back into society, and more than anything, to build myself a daily routine that worked for me while I was in there. And then when I got out of there, to continue on with that routine, because I had never lived as a responsible adult in the real world at all. never paid my own bills, never had my own place. I had my own car a couple times, but that was all through ill-gotten gains. And I'd never really, I'm 35 years old and I'm still a little kid. Also, while I was in pre-release, I decided that if I was gonna go on to do what I was trying to do to try to help other people that were in my position, that I was gonna have to get some sort of education, because nobody was gonna care what I had to say if I didn't have a reason for them to listen to me, I felt like. So I applied for school here at the university. For somebody with a felony record, there is a very rigid screening process that you go through. They want to know everything that you've ever done, all your convictions, the circumstances surrounding it. They want letters of recommendation, they want references, they want all, you know, there's a lot that goes into it. And my record is, I think atrocious would be a good word for it. I have 9 felony convictions just as an adult. Like I said, I've spent over a third of my life incarcerated. Very little time out here on the streets. I didn't graduate from high school. I had a GED. They told me no the first time I applied here. They gave me what's called a deferred admission. They wanted me to spend another year out here on the streets to prove, you know, following laws, following the conditions of probation and parole, being a productive member of society, to prove that I was sincere about my want to change. And I was disappointed at first, but I didn't let it get me down. And like, because before, it didn't take much to get me to just give up. You know what I mean? That was my MO. Things didn't go how I wanted them to out here. Things got a little too hard. I just give up and go back to where it was easy. And I knew I couldn't do that this time. I didn't have another one of those stints in me. I didn't have another chance to go in there and try to make it out again. I just didn't have that in me anymore. So I knew that I couldn't give up no matter what. I knew I had to be done with that life and stick to that and not give up on trying to build a new life no matter what. So I waited that year. I followed all the rules of probation and parole, didn't break any laws. I stayed clean off drugs and alcohol, and I reapplied, and they admitted me into school. That was a big deal for me. I was pretty proud of myself. And a lot of people that I knew were proud of me too. Like, people couldn't believe the change that they seen in me. I couldn't believe it myself. Because like I said, it was less than a year ago, I didn't even believe that I could stay clean off drugs or stay out of prison, never mind start going to college. So when I came here, I decided I was gonna major in psychology and minor in licensed addiction counseling. That way I can get to a point where not only can I counsel people with drug and alcohol problems, also I want to try to figure out a way to help people recover from being institutionalized, because not enough attention is given to how much that really affects somebody. Like, that profoundly affects a person when they spend you don't have to necessarily be long terms of incarceration, just incarceration period profoundly affects people, the way they think, the way they deal with their emotions, all of that. And it's something that there needs to be more attention paid to that, and there needs to be more solutions on what we can do to help people to recover from that. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I'm majoring in psychology. I am in a position today that I never ever thought I would be in. I've been out for about 2 years now, and I have accomplished more in this last 2 years, and I'm not even saying this like figuratively, like I've literally accomplished more in this last 2 years than I have in my whole entire life. And I'm about to turn 37 years old. So that's a big deal for me. And the best thing about it is I'm just barely getting started. This is just the beginning. I'm an only child for my mother. I'm her only son, her only child, period. And it broke her heart so much to see me repeatedly going in over and over and over again, to watch me go through the addiction for so long, and just how proud of me she is.
I'm so proud of him. I let him know all the time. Look at him, straight A's on the dean's list. You know, I mean, I knew he could do it because he always was smart.
I lost my father when I was incarcerated. And I'll never forget when I got that obituary and it lists family members and it said his son Shawn of Glendive. And I'm not from Glendive. The reason why I said Glendive was because there was a prison in Glendive that I was sitting in at that time, and that had like a huge effect on me, you know what I mean? Like my dad's obituary, and here I am listed as being in a prison. And then also when I went to that treatment facility, my mom got a kidney infection and she almost died when I was there. And ever since I lost my dad, it was like a constant fear, you know what I mean, that same thing was gonna happen with my mother, and it almost did happen. And that was also another thing that motivated me a lot more, because like just the reality that when I go in there, life doesn't stop out here. I last year went to his grave site for the first time since I've had a chance to, you know, and he died back in 2014. It took me almost 8 years to actually make it there. And I had my 3 years of sobriety coin, and I was able to put it on his tombstone or the gravesite, you know, and have a little conversation with him to say, I'm here, you know, I did it. So, I mean, it means the world to me. I know he'd be proud of me.